everybody. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. I appreciate the heck out of you for downloading this episode. Thank you. I'm going to keep this one short today, though, and let me tell you why. It's Remembrance Day, and I want to get down to the cenotaph by 11 a.m. So I'm going to endeavor to get this one done quick, and it's not that I don't care. It's not that I don't love being here and spending this time with you every single day. It's just, I think on a day like Remembrance Day, it's more important that we're down at the cenotaph, paying our respects to the Canadian Armed Forces and armed forces around the world who fought for freedom. And that includes those who are active duty and still serving, and it includes their families. So it's an important day to me. I hope it's an important day for you. May we never forget May we never get to a place of complacency where our problems get in the way of us observing Remembrance Day. So I hope you understand this one is going to be an abbreviated version, a no BS version of Scott Fox After 9. Let's jump into it right away. Yesterday, an apology was issued by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and the apology was to President Donald John Trump. Now, why would the BBC apologize to Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump is owed an apology for what they did. You know, one of the things that I do on this pod, whenever I get the opportunity, is highlight for you where the media manipulates the viewers. People just take for granted that what they see on the news is the news and they can trust it. Well, one of the most controversial things of recent memory is the January 6th riots in Washington at the U.S. Capitol. And there's a lot of people who think Donald Trump tried to inspire an insurrection. And they use the speech that he gave on the ellipse as evidence that he was trying to create an insurrection. Well, a lot of people haven't actually seen what Donald Trump said. And part of the reason for that is because of the media. I'm going to play for you what the BBC aired, and then I'm going to play for you what actually was said by Donald Trump. Listen to this very carefully, and then in just a sec, I'm going to play for you one of the executive directors at the BBC. This is how they edited Donald Trump to make it seem like he was promoting an insurrection in Washington during the January 6th riots.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
That was what the BBC aired, and I think that's what most people think Donald Trump said. Well, now even the BBC is admitting they edited the footage. This is not in dispute. They've admitted it. They edited the footage for it to sound like that. What did Donald Trump actually say?
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Isn't that disgusting what the BBC did? And why would they do that, Scott? Because they're trying to create a narrative. They manipulate their viewers. The mainstream media is well known for it, and I am so happy that so many people reach out to me on a regular basis now and point out some of the hypocrisy and some of the manipulation they notice watching the mainstream media news. I told you I would bring in the executive director of the BBC, who's now acknowledging what they did and sort of issuing an apology. Listen to this.
I would like to say it has been the privilege of my career to serve as the CEO of BBC News and to work with our brilliant team of journalists. I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider. If you'd excuse me.
Oh, wow. There's a lot to unpack just in that very short 25-second clip. I'll play more of it in just a second. So she has stepped down. That is Deborah Turnus stepping down as CEO of the BBC because of that. And even though she didn't edit the clip, she admits, and this is the responsible thing to do, the buck stops with her. So somebody's got to get fired or step down. And that's what Deborah here has done. She says the BBC is still the most trusted name in news. Personally, I don't know why anybody trusts any of these companies anymore. I really don't understand. You know what? Let me play it for you again, and I'm going to play it back to back, uninterrupted, before I play the rest of Deborah's remarks here. This is what the BBC did to manipulate people into thinking Donald Trump created some sort of an insurrection.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
They tried to distort your opinion. They tried to rewrite history. They tried to make it seem like something was said that was never said. Here's the rest of BBC CEO Deborah Turness.
Why did you fail to deal with the mistakes that were made?
And see my teams. Thank you so much.
Right, we're going in now. Do you think that the journalists are institution are corrupt like President Trump says? Do you think the journalists
Of course our journalists aren't corrupt. Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
Is there institutional bias at the BBC?
There is no institutional bias. Mistakes are made, but there's no institutional bias.
But why?
Let's be clear. That was not a mistake. That was intentional. In fact, you needed a very skilled editor to make it as seamless as the BBC made it look. There's no institutional bias at the BBC, she says. There's institutional bias in all of these mainstream media outlets. There's institutional bias in just about everything you consume. I have a bias. I'm a conservative. You're listening to a podcast hosted by a conservative-leaning individual. We all have a bias. The problem is people don't declare their bias like I do. I do it because it's the responsible thing to do. It shows a little bit of journalistic integrity. The BBC will go on and make it seem like they're completely impartial. There's the former now CEO still insisting they're impartial when clearly they're not.
Why weren't the mistakes dealt with on Trump, on anti-Semitism, on women's rights?
I'm sure that story will emerge, but for now I'm going to go in and see our team.
Do you think the board acted against you?
This way, Deborah.
Thank you.
Isn't that crazy? The BBC, to the bitter end, she had to step down over this, but still insists there's no institutional bias at the BBC. Anybody who watches the news should be aware of the fact that there is a bias. They never declare it. They want you to think they're impartial and you're getting all of the news information you need. And in reality, that is simply not true. Now I'm going to move on. Yesterday, Prime Minister Carney was speaking he was on the East Coast. I think he was in New Brunswick, and he was talking a little bit more about his budget. One of the things that's in this budget is a Buy Canadian provision. And I know that on its surface, a lot of people probably think, yeah, Buy Canadian, that makes perfect sense. And I don't disagree with you, especially when we're trying to shore up our own economy. If we have someone here who makes steel and aluminum, it makes perfect sense to use that company for steel and aluminum. But, and there's a but, what if they're more expensive than the competition? Should the taxpayers pay more just because they're Canadian? Some people will say, yeah, absolutely. We should still buy Canadian even if they're more expensive. Do you people that believe that, though, do that at the grocery store? You've likely noticed the Canadian produce, the Canadian meat, is much more expensive than some of the imports. But do you still intentionally spend more just because it's Canadian? Again, I'm sure there are some people listening that actually do. But what about quality? You know, we could insist on buying Canadian, and clearly the Prime Minister wants to do that. That's part of the Buy Canadian strategy, is you got to buy Canadian. What if it's not as good? So would the taxpayers pay more than they need to for something that's not even as good as the cheaper alternative? Are you doing that just because it's Canadian? How much are we willing to spend on this principle? Or should the taxpayers always get the best product at the best value? That's a question that we're going to have to debate. Here's a little bit of Prime Minister Carney speaking yesterday.
Canada's new government is deploying a similar combination of innovation, speed, and long hours through Build Canada Homes. Build Canada Homes is a new entity. It leverages federal public lands, a large portfolio of projects, highly competitive financing to help create scale in a new factory-built housing industry that can help Canada build millions more of affordable homes. This is an industry that can cut building times by 50%. Reduce costs by 20%, and lower emissions by a further 20%. And it's consistent with Canada's history. Our history is one of adventurers, risk takers, and above all, builders. Our country was forged by Indigenous peoples and voyageurs who built vast trading networks from coast to coast to coast before the Americans had even left St. Louis. Following the Second World War, Canada was ambitious, determined, and united in a mission to build big things that would include the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Trans-Canada Highway, Expo 67, and the CN Tower. But Canadians also built new neighborhoods for hundreds of thousands of returning veterans. And we expanded our universities, such as UNB. UNB saw its enrollment almost double.
Okay, little history lesson there from the Prime Minister. Yes, at one point we did build at incredible speeds, and we were very, very efficient at doing it. We had a lot of people coming home from war, and we needed a wartime effort to try and make sure that we had homes, and those homes turned into neighborhoods. And some of those homes are no longer there. They've been replaced by newer models, and in some cases, those homes are still there. What the Prime Minister is proposing here is not what our grandparents did, though, after the war. The Prime Minister is proposing a series of elaborate trailer parks, essentially. Modular mobile homes on land that you don't even own. Just the house. That is not what would have been welcomed by our soldiers returning from war. Not in any way. They wanted a home to live in the country that they just finished fighting for. So what are we going to do here in Canada? Because again, the Prime Minister is appealing to your sense of nostalgia. But that's not in reality what he's doing.
Canada is facing a hinge moment. The world's more divided and dangerous. The global trading system is being rewired, threatening Canadian jobs and businesses. The budget released last week, it estimates that U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty that they're costing Canadians represents around 1.8% of our GDP. Let me translate that. That's about $50 billion lost from our economy, the equivalent of $1,300 for every Canadian. And this is happening fast. It's a rupture, not a transition. And it means that our economic strategy needs to change just as dramatically and rapidly. That new strategy is at the core of Canada's new federal budget. The budget builds Canada strong by unleashing over $1 trillion in total investments in Canada over the next 5 years. Those investments alone will increase Canada's GDP by over 3.5%. Again, let me translate. That's $3,500 for every Canadian worker.
That's just such a misleading thing for the Prime Minister to say. Good on him. This is clearly a strategy. They probably did some focus groups to figure out which messaging would land better with the Canadian people. And what they've landed on is, well, thanks to Donald Trump, it's going to cost your family $1,300. No, it's not. Nobody's coming to you asking you for $1,300, and nor is the government going to try and collect it. He's trying to humanize it and put it on household levels. But this investment is going to put more money in your family's pocket. No, it's not. Nobody owes anything, and no, you're not going to get a check. When we spend that kind of money, $1 trillion over 5 years, $1 trillion that we do not have. Yeah, I guess that'll kind of boost our GDP, but we're really just taking from one pocket and putting it in the other. This isn't people investing in our country. It's us just deciding to spend our money here. I don't know why that would increase GDP. I think that's manipulation of the numbers personally, and that's not what GDP was supposed to indicate in economic terms. I disagree with the Prime Minister. I give him credit for being sneaky. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Thanks to Donald Trump, you owe $1,300. But thanks to my $1 trillion plan, it's worth, what, $3,500? Nobody's getting a check. And no, you don't owe any money either. That's an attempt to humanize it, but this is not real money that he's talking about. The $1 trillion is real. He's going to spend that quick, and some people are going to get extremely wealthy off of it. But no, you don't owe any money, and no, he's not sending you that kind of money either.
Now, we're going to build. But it's not just about what we build, it's also how we build, and that's what I want to focus for the balance of my remarks. We're going to build inclusively, in full partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We will build in solidarity with workers, creating good union jobs. We will build sustainably because reducing emissions isn't just a moral duty, it's an economic imperative.
Well, there he goes again with the green stuff. I mean, this prime minister in the last week or so is really starting to show his true colors. He is still very much a climate extremist. He is still very much one of the global elites. I'm shocked he's not down in Brazil partying right now with the rest of the COP30 individuals. He is still talking about low carbon oil, sustainability in building, and all that sort of thing. It's not just a moral imperative. It's an economic opportunity. No, it's not. It's an economic opportunity for him and his buddies. That's why they want us to build sustainably and stuff like that. It's all a racket, folks. It really, really is.
In full partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We will build in solidarity with workers, creating good union jobs. We will build sustainably because reducing emissions isn't just a moral duty, it's an economic imperative.
It's also very interesting that he highlighted we're going to build in solidarity with workers and create good union jobs. I'm shocked that unions give this guy the time of day. This liberal government has done so much to set back the labor movement. I can't even believe that they've got the audacity to try and link themselves to unions. I got news for you, Mark. The unions have moved on and they're looking at a conservative option because they've seen what happens to them under liberal governments. Take a look at the Air Canada flight attendants. Take a look at Canada Post. There has been so many examples of this government overruling a union's right to strike. Right or wrong, they did it. They're no friends of unions. That takes balls of Mark Carney to say something like that.
And above all, we will build Canadian by becoming our own best customer. With our new Buy Canadian policy, whenever the federal government spends, we will select Canadian suppliers by default, rather than using the current best efforts approach. And this new approach will extend to all federal agencies, all Crown corporations, such as Build Canada Homes, such as Alto, High Speed Rail, and such as our spending from our new Defence Investment Agency. Our Buy Canadian policy will include federal infrastructure spending, ensuring that as much as possible of that $70 billion we're planning to invest in the roads, bridges, and community centres on which Canadians rely comes from Canadian-made suppliers. And in those cases, when domestic suppliers aren't available, purchases will be required to include Canadian content or to be sourced from trusted partners. And those cases will be the exception, not the norm. And they will require ministerial approval.
Is anybody else concerned that this liberal government is going to be the people who decide who the winners and losers are? Who's going to get that $1 trillion over 5 years? Is anybody else concerned about this? And by the way, how are we going to have $1 trillion in spending? And that's not including universal basic income. You've likely heard by now, I've had no shortage of people share it with me. The Senate has moved forward a proposal to study UBI, Universal Basic Income. This is something that we're going to have to start talking about very soon because it seems like the government is going to try and advance it. And to tell you the truth, if I had to guess, what was Mark Carney's real motivation in running for prime minister? I would say number one, to make himself and his friends rich. And number two, to implement UBI. It is something that left-leaning governments want to do. And I'm not even going to say it's a terrible idea because I firmly believe in no Canadian left behind. But I also believe in offering a hand up, not a handout. And that's something that we all used to agree on, especially here in Canada. A hand up, not a handout. Well, UBI is exactly the opposite of that. It is a handout on steroids. If the government decides the universal basic income is $20,000 a year, whether you do or don't work, they will make sure that you get $20,000 a year. They're just going to write a check to you monthly. It'll get deposited into your account for zero effort. I know you're waiting for the catch, right? There is no catch. They're going to make sure that you have a livable income. Now, the problem here is that it does incentivize being lazy. It incentivizes not doing anything. And it very much makes people reliant on the government. Now, what if you make more than that amount of money? Well, at first, that'll be fine. But eventually, everybody's going to make the same amount. It's communism in another form with another name. That's the argument that critics of UBI would make. That's what they would tell you. We're going to have to talk more about this. The liberals cannot. It's going to cost us $93 billion a year right off the bat. $93 billion a year just handed out literally to folks who don't work and don't pay taxes. That's also an inequity. I'm working my balls off here. I work so hard for what I've got and to provide for my family. And I think that's an obligation of everybody. Work hard, provide for your family, get as far ahead as you can. I don't know that I want to work as hard as I am so that somebody else can stay home and just take their 20 grand a year. I think there's people who are going to get really used to relying on the government for their dental care, for their health care, for their income, for their food eventually. All these things are going to come up. Listen, this is not an episode about UBI. I will do one. I promise you. I'll even try and find an expert. I've got a very good friend who will not come on the pod, who was instrumental in helping to develop the software that they're going to use to administer UBI. He knows exactly how it works. He even knows when it's coming. I've got all the details. I just can't share them with you yet. But when we get to that point, I'll have a lot more to say about universal basic income. Let's get to some of the Q&A with the Prime Minister yesterday.
Jacques Poitras from CBC News. How do you make sure these Buy Canadian mechanisms you're talking about putting in place don't violate our international trade agreements?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we've done a review of all our free trade obligations to ensure that they are designed consistent with that. And we will, related to that, if I may, Jacques, we'll be making adjustments to the way the Canadian International Trade Tribunal operates, which is something that's internal to Canada. So many of the constraints are actually self-imposed on ourselves. And we're going to make the adjustments to that CITT framework so that we have the ability to fully deliver Buy Canadian.
I want to congratulate Jacques on a fairly good question, and I don't usually do that for members of the mainstream media, but that is a fine question. So the reason we're doing this Buy Canadian provision, and again, probably costing ourselves more and maybe getting an inferior product compared to what else is out there, not necessarily the best value for taxpayers at all. But what do we do about our other trade partners? You see, we're doing this to irritate the Americans. What about all the other countries that we don't have a problem with? If we start making it so they don't have access to our market, how long until other countries start saying, then screw you? Canadian companies can't provide infrastructure supplies for our country. Then we're really screwed. Then we're not just our own best customer, we're our own only customer. Yikes.
And how do you make sure buying Canadian doesn't drive up prices for construction and manufacturing?
Well, one of the big messages here is that we are going to build this country, and we are going to build this country for decades. So we've got a lot of skilled people in front of me and behind me, around me. In fact, everyone but me is skilled in this room. But we're going to need a lot more of them. And so one of the points is to be clear up front on the scale of what the ambitions are for the country, that the money is there, that we're going to approve these major projects, that we're going to drive large-scale home building, affordable home building in Canada, very much relying on factory-built housing in order to do so. So that means an opportunity for companies to compete for those contracts, but also to expand. And very importantly, for younger Canadians or Canadians thinking of changing careers, a clear opportunity for large-scale need for people in the skilled trades. And that's one of our core messages. And we're going to follow up with that, specifically with scaling up our apprenticeship programs that we provide, in some cases with provinces, including through unions and post-secondary education institutions.
Okay, that's kind of dishonest of the Prime Minister to not answer that question, and it's a very valid question. How are you going to stop prices from going up? If right now we can take suppliers from anywhere in the world, and we can take the best price and get the best product, and maybe the best price isn't the best product isn't the best price, whatever, we get the best value for Canadians. Well, if it's only Canadian companies that can bid, and the Canadian companies know that, what's to stop them from jacking their prices way up through the roof and making themselves very, very wealthy? This is anti-competitive. We are not necessarily going to be getting the best value. I agree with the sentiment wholeheartedly. Buy Canadian. Yeah, that's great. But I know from my household, and you know from your household, that sometimes it's just not in the cards to buy Canadian. Sometimes it's just too much compared to the alternatives. I'd love to buy myself some Alberta beef tonight, but there's other beef out there that's a lot cheaper than the Alberta beef. I'd love to buy Canadian produce, but the stuff that comes in from Mexico is a lot cheaper than the Canadian stuff, and I don't even know how that's possible because we're talking about Mexico. It's a whole country away. How could it possibly get here and get on our shelves and be cheaper than something that's grown just down the road? Well, that's a great question, isn't it?
Hello, Prime Minister. It's Lindsay Armstrong with Canadian Press. You said last week the risk in your budget is that Canada's economy won't grow fast enough. Yeah. Can you tell Canadians how their lives will be affected if that growth does not come to pass? Yeah, well, one way to answer that is something I referenced earlier in the speech, and it's contained in the budget, which is because both the scale of American tariffs, and just for reference that we have the best deal of any country, but there's still material tariffs, and we know it here in New Brunswick, across the country. It's affecting the forest products sector. It affects the steel aluminum sector. It's affecting the cabinetry sector now. So the impact of that, plus the uncertainty about what might happen next, and that's an uncertainty that's shared around the world. All of that is means that our economy a few years out is likely to be almost 2% lower, 1.8%. You translate in terms of what does that mean for Canadians, that's $1,300 for every Canadian. So the government, we're not going to take that. We're going to get that back and then some. And the way we do it is to build more homes, to build nation-building projects, to build cleaner energy, to build out this country, and that's what we're doing. So that's, in many respects, what's at stake.
No, and again, he didn't answer the question. After stumbling and fumbling around, he's starting to get more like Trudeau, isn't he? Ooh, he's feeling the pressure here, everybody. This budget is going to be incredibly consequential, if for no other reason but the generational debt that it leaves. Your grandkids will still struggle with high inflation because of the amount of money that this guy right here is spending. The question was simple. You say the government or the economy is going to grow with all of this. What if it doesn't? How will that affect families? He didn't answer the question. Does he know the answer? He must. There's no way that he hasn't researched that. Or is that why they're getting ready to bring in universal basic income? Because they know it's about to turn into a gong show amongst the middle class. All this timing lines up here, friends. I hope you can see where this is going. This is all part of a master plan that started long before Prime Minister Carney said he wanted to run for Prime Minister.
The energy sector doesn't appear thrilled about the budget. How can you succeed in turning Canada into an energy superpower when the budget didn't provide any of the 5 relief measures that the sector had asked for in its Build Canada Now letter earlier this year?
Well, I'm not sure I totally recognize that characterization, if I may. The first is, let's look at Canada's position as an energy superpower, and let me generalize it. If you're a superpower, you're able to do more than one thing, and Canada can do many things in energy. We have our electricity grid is 85% clean. That's because of hydro. It's because of nuclear, other renewable power. We have an enormous opportunity to scale up that clean grid. I met with Premier Holt, as you may know, this morning.
Man, I really don't understand what the goal here is anymore. We have an 85% clean energy grid. What are we worried about then? It's 85% clean. That's way greener than many other countries. Are we really going to spend $1 trillion to get the other 15% green the way Mark wants it? I just don't understand. We're at 85%. Again, earlier, Carney really trying to sell the fact that we've got the best trade deal with America. 85% of the products that go back and forth are tariff-free. then again, we're really only talking about 15%. How does that equate to $1 trillion over 5 years? I don't understand, other than I don't think people, regular people, critical thinkers are paying attention when this guy talks. He's telling us what he's going to do, and you can tell a lot from what he won't say. Very simple questions here that he's not answering.
What's your government's plan for imposing the federal backstop on jurisdictions whose industrial carbon price does not meet the benchmark?
So thank you for the question. So what we said in the budget, what we are going to do is we are going to tighten the federal backstop, the rules around the federal backstop, which is industrial carbon price for others, and particularly so that the gap that sometimes exists between provincial level pricing and that backstop closes, and we'll also lengthen the horizon for the backstop. So there'll be more coming on that.
He's openly saying it. He's leaning back into the carbon tax. The carbon tax is going to go up on the back end a lot in some provinces. He's going to tighten the gap so that everybody's paying the same amount as the highest payer. Everybody's going to have to do it. That means carbon taxes are going to go up. And he expects he won't get any opposition from any of us regular middle-class folks because he's not charging it to us anymore. He's just going to charge it to the industrial emitters. But then they pass the cost on to us. Do you understand how this works? When he got rid of the carbon tax, he didn't really get rid of the carbon tax. He got rid of the part that we see. The carbon tax is very much alive. And there he is openly talking about increasing the carbon tax yesterday. If the situation was reversed and Pierre Poilievre were musing about raising taxes and making life more expensive, you wouldn't believe how quickly the mainstream media would be all over that. Wall-to-wall coverage, whole panels of talking heads giving their opinion on the news. It would be remarkable. Have you heard anything about that on the news? Have you heard any of them discussing how Mark Carney is preparing to raise some provinces' carbon tax? No, they're not covering it because they don't want you to know that. They want this budget to get passed. They're hoping Carney can do whatever he has to do to get himself a majority government and keep himself in power. And then, once everything is safe, then they might try and make it seem like they're a little more impartial. But make no mistake, right now the mainstream media is just absolutely, totally in the tank for the Liberals, like they have been for a very long time. Friends, I got to get down to the cenotaph. Happy Remembrance Day, lest we forget, and thank God for the men and women who have served this country and are serving this country to fight for our freedoms. I just hope that more people here at home, non-soldiers, want to fight for this country, because it seems like we've got some forces here in Canada that want to take it in a direction that we can't even imagine right now. But I'm concerned. Have a great day. I'll be back here with a full episode tomorrow. I'll leave you with the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now.